I set the table for 8, even though I already knew only 2 of us would be sitting there. My wife was turning 75, and she kept glancing at the front door every time a car passed the house. She had baked her own cake that morning because she said it felt wrong not to. Our 3 sons had all promised to try to make it. By 6 o'clock, the candles were melting into frosting, and my wife was still smiling at an empty driveway. We live in Columbus, Ohio. Same brick ranch we bought in 1978. I ironed a clean tablecloth and took out the good plates, the ones we only used for holidays. Margaret insisted on slicing strawberries herself, even though her hands shake a little now. "They're probably stuck in traffic," she said, around 6:15. "There is no traffic on our street." By 7, the pot roast was cold. I called our oldest, David. Straight to voicemail. I called Mark. It rang twice, then went dead. I didn't bother calling Andrew. He had already texted earlier. "Crazy week, Dad. I'll try." I raised him. I gave him everything. Margaret lit the candles anyway. We sang to ourselves. She made a wish and blew them out in one breath. I saw her jaw tighten when she set the knife down. "They'll come Sunday," she said. "We'll keep leftovers." Sunday came and went. On Monday, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it at the door. It was from a law office downtown, Crawford and Klein. I recognized the name. David had mentioned them when he refinanced his house. Inside was a formal notice. It stated that Margaret and I were being asked to clarify the outstanding family loan connected to Mark's HVAC business, a loan we had supposedly guaranteed 3 years ago. Margaret sat at the kitchen table while I read it twice. "We didn't sign anything," she said quietly. I remembered a dinner in 2023. All 3 boys at this same table. Papers pushed in front of me. "Just a formality, Dad," Mark had said. "It's not really a risk." I had signed because he was my son. Now the letter said the business was in default, and as guarantors, we were responsible for $186,000. Margaret pressed her fingers into the edge of the table. "They would have told us." I didn't answer. That evening, David finally called. Not to apologize, not to ask how his mother's birthday went. "Dad, you got the letter, right?" he said. "Don't panic, it's procedural." "Your mother turned 75, I said. A pause. "I know. We'll celebrate later." I looked across at Margaret, folding napkins that didn't need folding. "Did you know about the guarantee?" I asked him. Silence this time. "Dad, we'll talk about it. Just don't make it bigger than it is." I had worked 39 years for the city of Columbus. I paid off this house. I built our savings slowly, honestly. Now I was being told not to make it bigger than it was. When I hung up, Margaret asked, "What did he say?" I told her the truth. And that was the first night she didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I drove downtown to Crawford and Klein. I didn't tell Margaret where I was going. She was still in her robe at 10, staring at the front window like she expected one of the boys to pull in and fix it all with a smile. The law office was on the 9th floor of a glass building I'd walked past for years without ever needing to enter. The receptionist spoke softly, like I was already someone in trouble. A young attorney named Thomas Klein met with me. Polite, efficient. He slid copies of the documents across the desk. There it was, my signature. Margaret's too. "I don't remember signing a personal guarantee," I said. "You did," he replied calmly. "Your son's business line of credit required collateral. When the business defaulted last month, the bank initiated recovery." "Defaulted?" I repeated. "Yes, sir. The company hasn't been solvent for some time." "Some time? Why weren't we told?" I asked. "Mr." Klein didn't answer that. He just adjusted his glasses and said, "You are jointly liable." On the drive home, I called Mark. He didn't pick up. I left one message. "Call me, now." He showed up that evening. Not alone. David came with him. They stood in my living room like executives about to negotiate a merger. Margaret brought coffee. Her hands were steady this time. Mark spoke first. "Dad, it's temporary. We just need you to refinance the house. The equity covers it." Margaret froze. "This house?" she said. "It's just paperwork, Mom. You won't lose it." I looked at my son, 46 years old. 2 trucks in the driveway of his place in Dublin. Vacations in Florida every winter. "I raised him. I gave him everything," I said quietly. Not to them, but to myself. David stepped in. "Dad, if the bank comes after you formally, it'll damage your credit. This is the cleanest way." "So you knew," I said. David didn't deny it. Margaret set the coffee tray down too hard. 1 cup tipped, spilling across the table. "You missed my birthday," she said. Not loud, not dramatic, just a statement. Mark rubbed his face. "Mom, please don't do that." "Don't do what?" she asked. "Make this emotional." I felt something shift in me then. Not anger, something colder. "How long has the business been failing?" I asked. Mark hesitated. "About a year." "A year? And you didn't tell us." "I didn't want to worry you." David added, "We were handling it. Handling it by using our house as a backup plan." Margaret stood up. "You boys need to leave." Mark looked stunned. "Mom?" "Leave," she repeated. They left without hugging her. That night, after they drove away, Margaret sat at the kitchen table and said something I had never heard from her in 53 years of marriage. "I don't trust our sons." And for the first time in my life, I didn't argue with her. 3 days later, the bank called directly. Not a letter, not a lawyer. A collections officer named Mr. Reynolds, who spoke in a tone that suggested he had made this call many times before. "Mr. Whitaker, we're reviewing recovery options. If the balance isn't satisfied within 30 days, we'll begin formal proceedings." Formal proceedings meant liens, possibly foreclosure. I hung up and looked at the framed photo on the wall. All 3 boys in Little League uniforms. Margaret in the bleachers, clapping like they'd already won. I called David again. He answered this time. "Dad, I'm in a meeting." "You're coming over tonight," I said. "All 3 of you." He exhaled slowly. "We can't just drop everything." "You already did," I replied. They arrived after 8. Andrew came too. First time I'd seen all 3 together since Christmas. Andrew tried to lighten the mood. "Let's not make this bigger than it is." That phrase again. I placed the bank statement on the table. Then another document I'd requested from Mr. Klein's office earlier that day. "Mark," I said, "your company hasn't paid payroll taxes in 6 months." He stared at me. "Where did you get that?" "It's public record." David shifted in his chair. "Dad, digging around like this isn't helpful." "Helpful," Margaret said quietly. "Helpful would have been telling us." Andrew leaned forward. "Look, if you just refinance, we can stabilize everything. Once Mark lands this new contract." "There is no new contract," I said. Silence. I had called one of Mark's former suppliers that afternoon. They hadn't been paid either. "You boys signed us onto something you knew was collapsing," I continued. "You didn't miss your mother's birthday because you were busy. You missed it because you didn't want to sit at this table and explain this." Mark slammed his hand down. "We were trying to protect you." "From what?" I asked. "The truth." Margaret's voice broke then. "We are in our 70s. This house is all we have." Andrew looked at his brothers. "There has to be another way." "There is," I said. They all looked at me. "I'm meeting with our own attorney tomorrow, not yours, and from this point forward, you will communicate through him." David blinked. "Dad, that's extreme." "No," I said. "What's extreme is using your parents as collateral without telling them the full risk." Mark stood up. "So you're just going to let the bank come after us?" The word "us" landed heavy. "They're already coming after us," I said. They left angrier than they arrived. Later that night, Margaret sat beside me on the couch. "Are we going to lose the house?" she asked. I looked around the living room. The worn armchair. The dent in the hardwood from when David dropped his first trophy. "I don't know," I said. And that was the first time in 53 years I truly meant it. Our attorney's name was Harold Bennett, 68 years old, gray suit, slow voice, no nonsense. His office was in an older brick building near German Village, nothing polished about it. He read every page without interrupting. When he finished, he folded his hands and looked at Margaret first. "Did anyone explain to you," he asked gently, "that this guarantee placed your personal residence at direct risk?" "No," she said. Harold nodded once. Then he looked at me. "Your son's attorney structured this aggressively. The guarantee is valid, but there are irregularities." My chest tightened. "What kind of irregularities?" "The timing," he said. "The guarantee was amended 8 months ago." "Amended?" I asked. He turned the document around. There it was, a second signature page. My name. Margaret's too, dated last October. We had not signed anything last October. Margaret went pale. That was when I was in the hospital. She had pneumonia. 3 days admitted. I barely left her bedside. Harold's expression hardened. "Then we have a problem." I felt heat in my ears. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," he interrupted calmly, "that either your memory has failed or someone attached your signatures to a revised document." The room went quiet. Forgery. The word hung there without being spoken. Harold continued, "If this amendment expanded your liability without your informed consent, it changes everything. But pursuing that means investigation, subpoenas, possibly criminal exposure." "For who?" Margaret asked. He didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. That evening I called David. "You amended the guarantee," I said. Long pause. "Dad, let's not get into technicalities. Did you attach our signatures to a revised loan?" It was the same document. It was not. He exhaled sharply. "The bank needed updated terms. It was going to default anyway. We were trying to buy time. By signing our names. You signed the original. That doesn't give you permission to sign again." Silence. Then David said something I will never forget. "If you push this legally, you'll destroy Mark. He could lose everything." I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd packed their school lunches for years. "I am already losing everything," I said. Margaret sat at the table listening. David's voice turned cold. "So that's it? You're choosing the bank over your own sons?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing not to be lied to." After I hung up, Margaret whispered, "Would they really forge it?" I thought about the birthday, the empty driveway, the careful phrases, the pressure to refinance. "I don't know what they're capable of anymore," I said. 2 days later, Harold filed a formal dispute with the bank, alleging unauthorized amendment and requesting a forensic review of the signature pages. That same afternoon, Andrew showed up alone. He looked different, tired. "Dad," he said, "if this becomes criminal, Mark could go to prison." Margaret stared at him. "Then he shouldn't have done it." Andrew ran his hands through his hair. "You're blowing up the family." I looked at my youngest son. "You boys did that 6 weeks ago," I said. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The forensic review took 3 weeks. 3 long weeks of waiting while the bank paused action but did not withdraw its claim. 3 weeks of Margaret barely eating. 3 weeks of silence from our sons except for one text from Mark that read, "Please don't do this." On a Thursday morning, Harold called. "I have the report," he said. Margaret sat across from me at the kitchen table. I put the phone on speaker. "The original guarantee signatures are authentic," Harold continued. "The amended pages were digitally lifted and placed onto a revised document." Margaret covered her mouth. "That means," I started. "It means your signatures were reused without authorization." Forgery. There it was now, clear. "And the bank?" I asked. "They're investigating internally. They'll likely refer it to prosecutors if they determine intent." Margaret's voice was barely audible. "Intent?" Harold didn't soften it. Fraud requires intent. After we hung up, the house felt too quiet. I walked into the hallway and stared at the framed graduation photos. David in a cap and gown from Ohio State. Mark in his trade school jacket. Andrew in his business suit. I raised them to be honest men. That evening, all three showed up unannounced. Mark looked pale. David looked furious. Andrew looked scared. "Why didn't you warn us?" David demanded. "Warn you?" I said. "The bank is talking about criminal charges." Mark stepped forward. "Dad, I didn't think they'd dig this deep. It was just paperwork. We were going to fix it before anyone noticed." Margaret stood up slowly. "Before anyone noticed that you signed our names?" Mark's voice cracked. "I was drowning." "And so you pushed us under too?" she asked. Andrew turned to me. "You can stop this. If you tell the bank you authorized it." "I did not," I said. David's jaw tightened. This could destroy Mark's life. "He did that himself," Margaret replied. The room felt smaller, hotter. Mark looked at me the way he used to when he was 10 and had broken a neighbor's window. "Dad," he said, "I'm your son." I felt the weight of that sentence. "Yes," I said. "You are." Silence. Then I added, "And you used your father's name like it was nothing." David's voice dropped to something sharp. "If you let this go to court, you'll tear this family apart permanently." I looked at Margaret. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "What family?" she asked quietly. They left without slamming the door. 2 days later, Mark's business accounts were frozen. The bank issued a formal fraud complaint. Detectives called to schedule interviews. On Sunday morning, Margaret fainted in the kitchen. I caught her before she hit the floor. At the hospital, as I sat beside her bed in the same building where she'd been last October, I realized something brutal. The stress wasn't just financial anymore. It was killing her. Margaret stayed in the hospital for 4 days. The doctor called it a stress-induced cardiac event. "Not a full heart attack," he said carefully, "but close enough that you need to understand the risk." I understood. I sat beside her bed at Riverside Methodist in Columbus and listened to the machines breathe for her while she slept. 75 years old. She had baked her own cake 6 weeks ago. Mark texted once, "How's Mom?" I didn't answer. David called the hospital room directly. I picked up before Margaret could. "We didn't know it would go this far," he said. "How far did you think it would go?" I asked. Silence. Andrew came in person that evening. He stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed. "I didn't know Mark reused the signatures," he said quietly. "But you knew about the amendment," I replied. He didn't deny it. "She could have died," I said. Andrew swallowed. "I know." Margaret opened her eyes then. She looked at him for a long time. "You boys were supposed to protect each other," she said softly. "Not use each other." Andrew's face folded in on itself. 2 days later, detectives asked me to come downtown for a formal statement. I went alone. They laid out printed copies of the documents, email trails, metadata timestamps. The amendment had been prepared from David's office computer, sent to Mark, submitted electronically to the bank. "Did you authorize this?" the detective asked. "No," I said. "Did your wife?" "No." He nodded and made notes. When I walked out of that building, I felt older than 72. That night, I recorded a video. I set my phone on the kitchen counter. Same counter where we'd eaten birthday cake alone. I spoke calmly. No shouting, no threats. "I raised you. I gave you everything I had," I said into the camera. "You didn't just risk my house. You risked your mother's life. If you think I will lie to protect you, you don't know me at all." I saved the file. 6 weeks had passed since Margaret's birthday. The next morning, detectives arrested Mark at his office. By afternoon, the local business journal had picked up the story. Fraud investigation, forged guarantor signatures, family business collapse. David called me, his voice shaking. "Are you happy now?" he demanded. "No," I said. "I'm not." That evening, I sent the video to all 3 of my sons. No explanation, no extra words, just the file. And then I turned my phone off. Mark was released on bond 2 days later. David hired a criminal defense attorney out of Cincinnati. Expensive, aggressive, the kind of man who sends certified letters instead of making phone calls. One of those letters arrived at our house a week after Margaret came home from the hospital. It stated that I had maliciously and unnecessarily escalated a private family matter into criminal litigation. Margaret read that sentence twice. Private family matter. As if forging your parents' signatures was a misunderstanding over dinner. Harold responded on our behalf. Short, direct. He attached the forensic report and the hospital discharge summary. After that, the letters stopped. Mark eventually accepted a plea deal. Reduced charge, probation, restitution to the bank. His business license was revoked. The trucks were repossessed. The Dublin house went up for sale before foreclosure could begin. David stopped calling entirely. Andrew came once more, alone. He stood on the porch and said, "I should have stopped it." I nodded. "Yes," I said. He cried. I did not. Margaret recovered slowly. She moves carefully now. We sold the house in December, not because the bank forced us, but because we no longer felt safe inside it. Too many memories tied to signatures and arguments. We downsized to a small condo on the west side of Columbus. No mortgage, no guarantees, no shared accounts. The boys did not help us move. On New Year's Eve, Margaret and I sat at our new kitchen table. Smaller, just 2 chairs. She reached across and held my hand. "Do you regret it?" she asked. I thought about the detectives, the courtroom, Mark standing before a judge, David's silence, Andrew's tears. I thought about her in that hospital bed. "No," I said. 3 days later, I received one final envelope from the prosecutor's office confirming the case was officially closed. I placed it in a drawer. We have not heard from our sons since. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There's more to come.